What is going on? Welcome back to Jiu-Jitsu Outlet. I'm sitting down again with the legend, Braulio Estima. Man, thank you so much for coming back on the show. If you missed it, if you're listening to this, go back and listen to episode 44. That was the first time that Braulio came on the show, and we got to hear about your story and how jiu-jitsu has helped you personally. And today I want to dive into a different topic. This is the first in a series of episodes where I'm going to be sitting down with jiu-jitsu legends and asking them about the principles of jiu-jitsu. So, Braulio, I just want to dive right into it, man. Thanks so much for taking some time with us today. We hear this all the
Thank you,
time, man.
Paul.
We hear this all the time, like focus on the principles. What are these mystical principles of jiu-jitsu that everyone is always talking about?
Hi, Paul. Thank you very much for having me here again. And a very kind of interesting topic, because if one talks about right, you need to focus on the principles. You need to focus on the principles, but what the heck they are? Who are those principles, man? What is it? Is it a grip? Is an idea?
Yeah.
Is it metaphorical? It's all I want is to sweep the guy, pass the guy's guard, and submit him. What the hell is the principles? Can I go from there, right?
Yeah.
So, look, the best way to explain at least the principles that I follow, the principles that I recognize that made my jiu-jitsu come to where it is right now, that I believe is the most technical that I've ever been in my whole entire life, the most understandable that I have been in my career. Principles means the beginning of everything, right? The principles can be the reason that is kind of that misunderstanding is because principles is quite simple and vast at the same time, because there are many kind of principles that you need to take in consideration, but everything is about the reason why of things, right? When you go to try to figure out the principles of life, you have to go back to the reverse engineering for when was the very first multicellular life came from. And then we all understood that the principle of life is the sun and water, right? That's a very important. Without water, without sun, that wouldn't be able to exist life. But don't forget, I'm not talking about oxygen because we didn't have oxygen. There are beings that don't need to live, right? For example, the phytoplanktons, they actually take CO2 instead of oxygen, but still alive, right? It was the very first being, multicellular, that was taking the energy from the sun and breathing CO2 and expel the O2. And then that became the principle of life, right? So without the sun, there is no chance that the life would exist here. So it's very important. That's one very important principle of life is sun. We need the vitamin D, and the plants that we live because of them needs the sun to be able to do the photosynthesis and came from the phytoplankton and blah, 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 blah. So this is one principle metaphor to figure out what principles are, right? Why are we here? Why do we why we are alive? And then we have to backtrack to the very principle. So there are many different ways of life. There are many different species of life. That's the same way there are many techniques in jiu-jitsu. There are many strategies. There are many ways of fighting, right? But when I say principle of a technique, I have to understand the reason why it works, not how I do it. Is why it works. And this is more focused on the reactions of my opponent. Example, when I want to sweep, right? The techniques that you use for sweeping the person, the principles are, I need to invert the person, but at the same time, he cannot post to defend the reversal. And then when you invert the person and he couldn't post, then I need to stop the person to stand back up. And that's why all the techniques involved in sweeps are based on holding what he could post first. Then I take him off balance to decide that he cannot post, therefore he will fall. Then I need to figure out ways of keeping securing what he needs to stand back up while I end up on top. Therefore, I complete the technique. It doesn't matter what technique is. You know what I'm saying? So to find the principles, you need to look for what is happening to my opponent, not what I'm doing. Because what I'm doing is a specific way to achieve that result. And same things for submissions, right? The submissions, let's say, if I go to a cross collar, when I put my first collar, is the first hurdle. Then my opponent will try to stop me to do the second move. So how can I prevent of my opponent to do the block of my second move while I am doing the technique? And those are important concepts to understand to develop the principles. Because a technique, you can have many ways of doing techniques with the same principle. So this principle, I can develop, I can do this way. I can do a kimura. I can do a omoplata. I can do a barato plata. I can do things that are the same principles, but done completely different, that those don't correlate to each other. So if you focus on the technique in that way, but if you understand what is happening to my opponent with this, I can then understand the principle. Then I can kind of correlate to that. And when I'm in here, I can make it even better by understanding the principle correlate to many more. This is probably, I don't know if you understood what I meant, but that is how I see in my mind. It's all about the principles are what make the reason for a certain technique to be successfully executed. And if you don't understand the principles, if you're fighting for a certain way of doing things, on the adjustments that my opponent will do to try to free himself, if you don't know the reason why you're fighting for, you end up trying to follow the technique, and that's why sometimes you end up losing at the very end, because I focus on the specific way instead of trying to understand the reason why I can get him in.
Yeah, I love what you said, man. And I just want to connect what you said about the sun and water being kind of the principle of life to what you're saying here. At least my takeaway. It's almost like you know, I don't know if you've ever studied symbolism or metaphor before, but
I love it.
A lot of times in philosophy, the sun is equated with like masculinity or the will, you know, the your drive, you know, you trying to make an impact on the world is kind of what the sun refers to, whereas the water refers to the feminine, the mother, the nurture, the, you know, the wave that goes out, and then the sun is more the wave that comes in. You know, it's like the crashing force versus the retracting force. This is something my favorite philosopher writes about. His name's Eliphas Levi. He talks about how in nature there is a force that repels and a force that attracts. And I think that's kind of what you are getting at here. There's it's the same sort of thing in jiu-jitsu. There's this force of you trying to do things to your opponent, of you trying to like enforce your will on your opponent, like, you know, trying to submit them. But then there's also your opponent's reaction, which is almost like that opposite force that you have to contend with. And it, you know, when you were talking about sweeping them in different directions, I was reminded kind of the water, like you were talking about before. You know, you have to pay attention to which direction your opponent is going in the same way that the water moves around. I don't know. I something that reminded me of what you said is what Bruce Lee said, you know, that in martial arts, you have to be like the water. It's kind of a cliche thing, but yeah, I wanted to ask you about that. Is there anything like that you would equate martial arts to, like any sort of movement in nature, I guess, that you think about when you're doing your practice?
Look, I will tell you something that I have been getting very deep uh, understanding of it, uh, which is you can only control what you can, your intentions. That's my intentions. Nobody can control. Nobody can control my actions. They can manipulate my actions, and I can react however I want. And I can only react in three different ways. I can not react at all. I can react correctly, and I can react wrongly. So my opponents too. They cannot react. They can react right or wrong accordingly to each stage of the fight. Now, I can only control my intentions, but every move that I do, I should always take in consideration what just happened and act, take in consideration what is about to happen as well. It's not just he does something, I cancel. I do something, I can. Like that, we're going to be stuck forever in the same loop, right? So if you want to step ahead of the game, I need to take in consideration something just happened that I need my against what just happened, because then I'm going to keep being in the zero. My action has to be taking consideration what is about to happen at the same time, and I need to be prepared for the worst case scenario. And the worst case scenario is when I act on the present is if my opponent reacts correctly. And if I am prepared and ready to deal with my worst case scenario, if he reacts wrong, I'm good. If he doesn't react at all, I am good. But if he reacts correctly, I am prepared, lies, and I'm ready to take. So that's kind of when you go in the depth way of fighting strategy, because fight is between two people. It's not just about what I want all the time. You know what I mean? And the reactions of my surroundings, like in life, is not on your control. As long as you are prepared to deal with the worst case scenario, you're always going to be able to strive forward in the right way. It all depends on you. And of course, in jiu-jitsu, is about experience, try and error, and understand what the person did when I practiced some sweep. What did he do that ended up blocking what I wanted to do? So that is a problem. So now, before you do it again, the same way of attack or whatever, you need to take in consideration that problem before even I start attacking. Because if I'm going to deal with that attack and deal with the problem at the same time in the present moment, I'm already late. So if I already know by try and error, because every time I try to do that thing, the person uses that specific thing to stop it, before even I put myself into the situation to apply, I need to be aware of that thing. So where is that thing? Where is it? Is it here? Let me get that thing. Now I'll figure out my way to do the same thing without letting it go that thing. Because when he needs that thing, I already have it in my hand. So when he needs,
I think what you're talking about is true for all of life. You know, like if
anything.
You are going into business, for example, you've had all these failures in the past. You're so much so much better positioned to go in and start a new business or something, because you've already had those mistakes, you know, and you've already had all those things. You know, I love something that I wrote down that you said is that the fight is between two people. You know, the fight is between two people. I love what you said there, that, you know, you always have to take into consideration what the other person is doing, that trial and error is one of your best friends. So I wanted to ask you this, man. When you're doing jiu-jitsu, are you doing it more intuitively, or are you thinking about what you're doing? Like when you're doing, are you just flowing, or are you actively thinking throughout the roll?
Look, I have a direction that I want to bring the fight into, which is what I'm good at. But my pursuit nowadays is to divert the attention of my opponent so I can get that kickstart that I know when I start, I will be ready for whatever comes, and I will just flow from there by always canceling what he can do and capitalizing on it. You know, check this out, Paul. One of the beauties that I have noticing and the importance of martial arts, but especially jiu-jitsu, because it's like you feel the actions and reaction on your skin right there on the present moment, is one very interesting concept. Check this out. Have you stopped to think that in the spectrum of being good and very bad, right? Neither when you are too good as a too kind and you're too evil, it's opposite spectrum, right? If you're too evil, you are bad. If you're too kind, people will take advantage to you. And everything is about to figure out the balance, right? For you to figure out the balance, it's very important that you try to find the middle term. Like in politics, if you get the guys that's the left ring, extremely left, will never ever have a conversation with the guys the extreme right, because they are completely opposite. But I believe that both has good inputs and both has bad inputs. If you're not willing to listen, to try to have open mind, to understand the reason why the perspective is on the other side exists, you can never figure out the balance. To be honest, if there was no extreme right, no extreme left, everyone in the middle, there will be no bloody side too. So I can balance it out. And if you are not bad at all, you either have to have the experience of something bad that happened to you, so you best way the next time, or you can be the bad person who did something bad to someone, and then you took the consequence, the result, and see, man, this is not exactly what I would like that happened to me, and then you learn from that or not, it's up to you. Or you can be on the passive way and see one bad people dealing with the good people and see the consequence between them and learn. And that would be the best learning process. And still, I could have the action of doing nothing and still learn by other two doing it and see the consequence. And also I could be the guy acting bad and learn from the consequences and take your conclusions. Or I could be the guy good, be taken by the bad and take the conclusion. So it's all about experience, right? Now, in jiu-jitsu, if you see, we practice all what the evil mind practice in the. I want to manipulate him. I want to put him in a very difficult situation. I want to put him in a situation that he cannot get out. I want to submit him. I use all the mindset that the evil has in a game that we are friends and respect each other. But when your mind is dealing with this kind of problems on the day-to-day basis, you are able to apply this mind process on the day-to-day basis, and you can always be prepared and ready for the worst case scenario. In the worst case scenario in jiu-jitsu, is my opponent to do something right. But in the worst case scenario in life, if the environment does something really bad, but the mind process is the same. When your brain is used to take the problem-solving mindset with that mind, when someone does a step, I go, I know what this might lead, because I know exactly what I would do if I was him, because I do that every day in the mats. Do you get what I'm saying? This is pretty cool. So it's easier to figure out the balance for life too, when you understand in depth the jiu-jitsu mindset of fighting.
It's the balance you're talking about. That's something that you talked about so much in that what you just said is like finding that middle pillar between the left and the right. And something that came to mind was you can't just have one element to your game. You can't just be 100% a leg locker and no zero takedowns, right? You have to be balanced. But on the other hand, if you're the greatest takedown person ever, but you don't know any leg locks, then you might get leg locked, right? So I feel like this balance is super important. And I think that I wanted to get into talking about this a little bit. What do you feel people need to focus on when they are starting out as a martial artist? Like when someone is just getting started in their journey, obviously it takes time. What do you think is something super important that someone needs to focus on in that first couple of years of training above all other things from a principle perspective?
Look, the first step in everything that I came into my conclusion by back engineering my jiu-jitsu life, right? I believe that the first thing that will give you a kickstart for development is you to be honest with yourself and accept yourself and your surroundings. Okay, people tend to find out something to justify the unsuccess story or for their failures or whatever. But if every time something goes wrong, you blame something or someone else for it, you're never gonna progress. You need to accept, okay, I fucked up. I made a mistake. The guy did better than me on that grip. He was faster than me on that grip. He controlled a very important component of my strategy that he had canceled everything that I could do against him. And I need to be aware of that. So I need also to understand that in my case, I am tall and lanky. I have my attributes of reach, but I also have my disadvantage of under hooks and gaps and exposing my limbs. So you need to get into terms with yourself and be truthful. That is the most important thing for your first step. And then when you have that, it's much easier that you can start progressing correctly instead of trying to progress copying someone for the sake of it. All right. A lot of people used to ask, who is your inspiration? I don't have just one person. I would be stupid or silly just to focus on one person to inspire myself. Did Roger has a very big influence on my game? Of course he had. Did the Carlos Gracie Jr. did have a big influence on my game? Of course he did. But also people like Marcelo Garcia also had an influence, but I am not short like him. No, I'm not calling him short, by the way, but I'm saying I'm tall, much taller than him. But it doesn't make no difference in terms of the results if you do it right. Marcelo Garcia, in comparison to me, we are different range, but he's as successful in his jiu-jitsu because he understood his body and applied the technique according to his limitations and his attributes as much as I do. But man, I remember when I used to go and train, wherever I am, put these arms everywhere. I used to tap 6 times to a guy that was half of my weight. This bastard. And he stopped training jiu-jitsu when I got good and I could never get back to him. But what I'm saying is, you have to understand the game. What is the purpose of the game? Okay? Remember, the final objective is to meet someone. But that is a game going on that you need to understand. I remember when I was inside of someone's close guard, I tried to roll the guy on top to end up on top of him or try to choke him from the close guard. Man, then my arm gets completely exposed, right? So you need to understand where you're safe, where you're not safe. So first thing you got to understand is to be able to secure and be safe in the areas that are mainly most important areas. For example, if it is open half guard or Z guard or close guard, you have to understand on how to keep the person in there. Because how can I think about submitting someone when I don't even know how to keep a person in that place? The same thing, for me to be able to get out of someone in the close guard on top, I need to know how to be inside of someone else's close guard and be safe. So I can stand up being safe, because when you give your tries, something goes wrong, you need to go back to the safety position so I can still be in the game. The same thing when I'm in the close guard on the bottom, before I try to sweep or submit, I need to know how to sweep or submit, and doesn't work, I need to go back to keep the guy there so I can give it another try. And that is how you build your branches. What's the point of you trying to submit someone from the back when you cannot keep the person on the back control? How can I want to submit someone on the side control when I cannot keep the person on the side control? Because the first important is control before the submission position. When you have the understanding on how to keep the person for that, that's the first step. And then you start building your branches accordingly to the solid base, which is to be safe and or controlling in a specific scenario.
I love that, man. I think that was some really good advice. I'm going to be stewing over what you said in this interview for quite some time. I've got about 2 pages of notes so far. But we got to wrap this up here, but I wanted to ask you before we do, is there anything else that you would add to this list of principles? Like, is there anything that you wish that I had asked you more about that you would like to talk about related to this?
I think everything has to come for your own personal understanding in the journey. And if it was that easy, everyone would just get this information and it would be a world champion, right? There is a lot of things that follows through. But one thing that I can assure, when the journey is about you and yourself, to strive to be as good as it could be. When you are just practicing one way all the time, a specific way all the time, you're going to be limited, like that guy that just practice like luck. They will be good until someone can defend. And again, everything there is a way out. That's one of the most important lessons in jiu-jitsu. For every problem, there is an answer for escaping. So if you focus just on one thing, you are limiting yourself in a specific way until you fight someone that knows how to deal with that. And then you don't have another resources. So the more answers you have in the most variable situations, that doesn't want to get you surprised. You are weapons. Imagine I could go left, right, up, down, backwards, forwards. You know what I mean? That's how it is. If you just go one direction all the time, you're going to be limited until someone can deal with that direction. So be patient. Patience is one of the most beautiful and tough attributes to have. Some people are naturally patient. Other people are not. I am not a natural person, a patient person, but that one thing that I am patient for is jiu-jitsu, on fighting, on teaching, on inspiring people with it. I have that patience in it, and I feel that I succeed towards that. But I am not patient in many other things, and I'm not that successful in many other things, because patience is very important, because jiu-jitsu is real, it's truthful. And everything that's real is truthful doesn't come fast, because everything that comes fast goes fast. When you have the patience to take your time, to understand that there will be a struggle, do you understand that people that's going to fight training with you 1 week, you are doing well, but that person is going back home all the time thinking, how can I stop that? And the next week, suddenly things doesn't work. It's not because of you. It's because everyone is trying to strive to be better. When you have that patience on how to have more options and answers that you only going to figure out if you focus on yourself, that's the answer. You know, it's very vast. It's very easy to say that when you are on top. You know, it's like when you say that money doesn't bring you happiness. But how can you tell this to a homeless person that all they think about is to get some money so they can eat, so they
Yeah,
can survive? It's very
exactly.
difficult. But one day when they reach that point, they'll go, shit, yeah, it makes sense. You know, money didn't bring me happiness. I was happy there anyway. And maybe money brought me problems. You know, so one is your own personal journey. Everyone is the Neo of the Matrix. Everyone has the potential to be the Neo, because everyone is the protagonist of its own life. So it's all about you try to understand yourself within. And it doesn't matter what people tell you. It's what you tell to yourself, because people will tell that you can, people that will tell you that you can't, and people will tell that you should stop. That's fine. It's good enough. But it's up to you what you're going to tell. Whatever you tell you and you follow strongly, you will get whatever you want.
That's a mic drop right there. Mic drop on that. That was beautiful, man. I love it. Hey, Zoom is going to kick us off here in just a moment, as they do. But hey, one thing you said that really stood out to me, and I just want to reiterate, I wrote this down. You said that jiu-jitsu is real and truthful, and nothing that is true comes fast. I just feel like that is so beautiful, man. That summarizes
it's reality.
So much of this whole conversation. But man, thank you. Where can people find you if they want to follow you on social media or want to see what you're up to?
Guys, I'm mostly active on the Instagram at Braulio Estima. You know, I'll be putting out a lot of content, not only for jiu-jitsu, but as well for my experience in life. And then I'm going to the next level to try to help people to achieve their dreams and the happiness fulfillment, which is anything in life with the same principles of what I learned in jiu-jitsu. So if you guys want to follow me up there, you guys are going to get some nice golden dust out there.
Braulio, you're the man. You're a legend. I appreciate you taking the time today. And I look forward to releasing this conversation, hearing what people have to say.
Thank you very much, Paul.
Thank you,
It's
brother.
been a pleasure, always.